Welcome to Halfway There. I'm Eric Nevins, and with me today is a special guest. He's got what I think might be the coolest podcast name out there, Seminary Dropout. It's Shane Blackshear. Did I get that right, Shane?
You got it.
All right. Well, hey, welcome to the show. I appreciate you joining us on Halfway There.
Thanks for having me.
Great. Well, I discovered your show based on looking for some content. You've had on some pretty amazing authors on your show. I was looking for some stuff from Alan Hirsch, who's got some really interesting things about the fivefold, which is kind of new to me, to be honest. And that was really enlightening. And I thought, man, I would really like to reach out to you, talk to you, and hear a little bit of your story, how you came to podcasting, and what God's doing with you.
Awesome, man. Well, I'm glad to be here. Honored to be on.
Yeah, it's exciting. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about who you are and where you are now, and then we'll go back and I'll just ask you a few things about your journey.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'm nobody, but I get to talk to a lot of somebodies. You mentioned the people that have been on my show. I've been super lucky to be able to interview some of the people that have been on. And my background is in ministry. I pastored a church for about 5 years, and then kind of felt a release from that, and thought I was going to go into just secular work, and nothing wrong with that. And I did, and I still do that, but got about 9 months into it and realized that couldn't be it. I needed a foot inside the ministry world somehow. And so out of that kind of birthed my blog, and then eventually the podcast, which is mostly what I do now. And so my podcast is, I've got two, but the primary one's Seminary Dropout, interview exclusively format. So every episode's an interview with somebody else. Been doing that for about 4 years now, and really like it and enjoy being able to do that. And then about a year ago, I started a second podcast with one of my friends. She's a social work professor at Baylor University, and that podcast is called On Ramp, and it's all about talking about race through the lens of Christianity, and really enjoying that endeavor as well.
Yeah. How do you find enough content for a podcast about race? I don't these days.
Right,
really,
yeah.
Where do you get that from?
Yeah, nothing going on around us about that.
Yeah, no kidding. Wow. Well, that's incredible. I haven't had a chance to listen to that one yet, but I did see it, and I will be checking it out. It sounds like an interesting kind of format to take on those issues.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's very different from Seminary Dropout. Obviously, it's not an interview format, and I have a co-host, and I just really enjoyed doing it. And we kind of just wanted a place for people who were open-minded, but just didn't have the information or the education about issues surrounding race, and a place where they could go. And that's where the name On Ramp came from, just kind of a starting point for people. And we really thought that Christians especially should know about this, and be people who see the image of God in everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's amazing how, if we're not careful, we can denigrate that with our politics. If we mix the two things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's kind of what's difficult, is because so much of it has been politicized, and we really think that it's an issue that's central to the gospel. That's why I didn't use the word equality. I said see the image of God in everybody, because that's truly a Jesus concept, I think.
Yeah, that's sort of the ultimate leveling of the playing field, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. God really refuses to play favorites in that way.
Yeah, amen. So just one point I want to make, and then I want to go on to something else. But I think it's astounding when you think about how central that is to the gospel throughout Scripture, going clear back to Abraham, that his calling wasn't just for him; it was for all the nations. And if we lose that, we've lost something really vital and important to the gospel.
Yeah, that's a great point. I've been thinking a lot about lately, if we're not careful, kind of the narrative that we could put forth in a well-meaning one is Jesus was nice and racism isn't nice, therefore we shouldn't be racist. But it's more specific than that. Like these issues were dealt with in the Bible, and they're it is explicitly there. And so who knows? I'd love to like flesh that out some other time. In some other platform. But that's you're absolutely right to look at Scripture to see these narratives and these themes of that image of God in everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that is being reclaimed. So I mentioned that your podcast, Seminary Dropout, is probably the coolest named podcast out there. Where'd you come up with that?
Well, so I'm glad you asked. It's like one of the biggest, it's something that like you're saying that people really like, but it's also a big point of confusion for people. Sometimes when I'm on other people's podcasts, they'll say Shane Blackshear, the Seminary Dropout. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, it's not me. It's like, the name of the show. But it is confusing. I asked for it because I asked for that confusion because I literally am a seminary dropout. I've dropped out twice. And so that kind of is where the kernel of the idea for the show, of the name of the show came from. But really, it serves more of a metaphor because I wanted a place where we could have these deeper theological conversations. And the people that I have on, they run the gamut. I mean, even have people like musicians and things like that on, but also have these top-notch theologians on that I can't believe they decided to sit down with me. And yet, so we have these conversations, and yet they're never conversations that I don't think just the average Christian can't follow and understand. And so, I really aimed at what I really wanted was for, people that who think that the Christian bestseller list at Barnes & Noble is like good theology or just good Christian literature, and I wanted to kind of expose that audience to something a little bit deeper.
Yeah, I love that.
So to explain that, it's a little bit seminary and a little bit dropout. To get back to your question, that's where the name comes from.
It's a mixing of the two. Okay. Well, I liked it because I once was a seminary dropout. So I told you that I got an MDiv from Denver Seminary, but before that, did my undergrad at Trinity in Chicago, and then went to TEDS, Trinity Evangelical Divinity School, which has some amazing scholars, D.A. Carson and others. And I took a class from Wayne Grudem, which was pretty cool.
Yeah,
pretty heavy hitting guy. And then I basically hit a wall and I had to take a break. Turned out to be 3 years, and when I went back, I came out to Denver for the spiritual formation focus. But anyway, the seminary dropout thing caught my attention right away. I was like, oh yeah, that's me. I can relate to that. So, anyway, so yeah, you've had some great things. So friends, I would encourage you to go out and go ahead and subscribe to Seminary Dropout and On Ramp. Those are both, Shane's having some great conversations there. Tell me, Shane, how did you come to Christ? How did that start out? How did faith start in your life?
Well, I was raised in the church. And so, I came from a family that believed, and I probably have a kind of a typical story for a lot of people that grew up in church, times of not owning my faith and then kind of coming to own it. And so, I think I quote unquote walked the aisle, which is Christian speak for becoming a Christian when I was like 5 or so. And then really kind of later in my life wondered if that was really real. And I really feel like when my relationship with God became real was really when I was like around 12 or so. And when, I could really see like an actual change in my heart at that time. And I feel like that sounds weird saying that, because even at 12 years old, it's not like you're even have the possibility of being a terrible person when you're 11, but
you never know. Yeah.
But I do know the state of my heart. I knew that I was really on that path towards kind of a cultural Christianity. And then it became something I cared about, for real, so to speak, at that point. So,
What was the
yeah.
impetus for that?
Say it again.
What was the impetus for it becoming real?
Yeah. That's a great question too. So about that time, I went into my church's youth group. I went from like regular kids Sunday school to a youth group, and we about that same time, they had hired a full time youth minister, and I don't know what can I say. Like he really kind of made the gospel come to life in a way that I hadn't seen before, and kind of spoke my language.
Like through his teaching or his?
Yeah, yeah. And it's hard to even pinpoint what that was
Mhm.
exactly, but I don't know. I think I kind of felt like before that I had like a handshake deal with God, like I would just not be too bad of a person and we would kind of be cool. And so I think just through my youth minister's teachings, it was kind of like, God doesn't really work like that.
Mhm.
Um, this is about a relationship, which sounds cliche, but it really wasn't cliche to me then. And it was really a really meaningful thing.
Yeah, I love that. So I love that God works in so many different ways in many people's lives, and so you had the opportunity to find Christ in church when you were young, and not everybody has that opportunity. I think I'm guessing that He's done some pretty awesome things with you in walking with you since then, and maybe we'll get a chance to hear some of those.
Yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, I think my faith looks a lot different today than it did 10 years ago,
Uh huh.
and maybe even 5. So yeah, it was a lot of changes. Um, and and even think about the kind of the kind of Christianity and the kind of Christian I was at 12 years old. Um, I look at that now and I think, boy, that kid's theology was really screwed up. But what I can say is that I was sincere and I did have a heart for God and to learn more and to
Mm-hmm.
grow and to follow Him. And that speaks a lot. Like we
Yeah.
could undervalue that. Like that's a big deal.
Oh yeah. Well, the reality is that's what God loves, right? I mean,
Yeah.
he wants to see that. That's what He loved about David. That
Yeah.
he saw his sincere heart and his sincere love and desire to be with God. And
Right. Right. Yeah. And I think too, I think we could probably think of people who are the opposite that like maybe have the right theology, um, but they have a stubborn spirit or they're just not good people.
uh huh.
Like on paper it looks good and their beliefs look good, but there's a disconnect in their life.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so your youth pastor was an early influence. How did you have any early experience, not necessarily early, but maybe in those teen years or so experiences where you really learned to trust God more deeply?
Hmm. It's a good question. Yeah, I mean, I think so. It's hard for me to pinpoint an exact, I don't know, moment, but so I think one, when I think back about being a junior high kid and a high school kid, the biggest the biggest sacrifice that you can make at that age is like a social one, right?
Yeah.
To not do what you need to do to blend in or to be popular. And I remember that being a very conscious choice. Like if I do A, B, and C that I should do, this will cost me socially. And so I think, I guess the upside of that is you're also so idealistic as a teen that you think like, I will do this. I will die for this.
Right.
And so some of that maybe worked in my favor. So yeah, I think it's easy as an adult to be like, that's not really a real sacrifice, but it felt real at the time, and I'll probably look back 10 years ago at my life now and think that wasn't a real sacrifice for the sacrifices I'm making now, but it feels real in the moment, and that's significant.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. That experience where you have to trust God really matters at the time, and it sort of builds from there.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's one thing I've learned from doing this is that we always trusting God is learned. You have to take just like a child learning to walk. You take little steps one at a time, and you fall down, and then you get back up.
Yeah. It's almost like practice, like anything else. You're making that decision for now, but it's also practice for the next decision, I think.
Right, and he's constantly asking us to trust him a little bit more.
Yep.
Yeah, which is good. Cool. Well, so you ended up being a pastor. How'd that happen?
Oh man, a lot of naivete, a lot of youthful ignorance. Basically, I mean, it's a weird story, especially now looking back at it as an older person. But essentially, some friends and I had an opportunity to plant a church. In the town we were in, there was a church that had kind of just died out. Like the congregation had gotten older and died off, and there basically wasn't anybody left. And the remaining few decided what they wanted to do was find someone they could hand that building off to start a new church. And so we were good friends with those people. And let me tell you, having a building is the worst reason to start a church. I mean, I feel like we had a call, but we thought that was in the future after we finished seminary. And then that opportunity came open, and it was like, oh, hey, what if we do this now? And so, a lot of misguided thinking, and yet, God blessed it. Like there were a lot of good things that came from it. So yeah, that's kind of how it happened.
Right. Well, so that's what I'm wondering. You say misguided thinking, but there's this opportunity. And so sometimes it's hard to distinguish opportunity from God's leading, right? So what made you think this is the right thing to do right now?
I had felt a calling in my life specifically to church planting. But like I said, I thought in my head that was going to be some point in the future, after we finished seminary, and, maybe after that, go with the team.
Where were you going? Where were you in seminary?
That time I was at Truett Seminary, the Baylor Seminary.
Okay.
Which is fantastic in Waco, Texas, Baylor University Seminary. It's called George W. Truett. Great seminary. I loved it. And so, yeah, I think so. So I have the desire, but I thought it was going to be later on. And then, kind of like I said, when the opportunity came with this building and this place, a friend of mine and I had said, "Hey, let's do church planting together someday." And so when that building came open, I went back to him and I said, "Hey, what if we did it now?" And like I said, extremely naive. But one thing led to another, and we planted there.
Tell us about some of what God did, because you said God did some cool things there that you felt like God really.
Sure. Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we can point to is when we looked around on a Sunday evening, which that's when we met. That's when we gathered. Our building was full of people who wouldn't be at church otherwise. And I think that's no small thing. I mean, so many of our churches' growth comes from people transferring from one church to another when growth comes. And really, all of our people were people that probably wouldn't be somewhere otherwise. And so that was really significant. And it gave us a chance to really be in proximity with people that we wouldn't be around otherwise. We were really a church of college students and people in poverty mostly. And so of all the hard things during that time, that was one of the beautiful things, that we were really like kind of experiencing community with each other.
Yeah, that has to change you. How would you say that changed you?
Yeah, I mean, it just... I don't know. It's so hard to explain. There's so many intangible ways when, I grew up very middle class, and we didn't really know poor people, and to know them and to be their friends, and we learned things about, like, on the ground. We kind of learned things about our broken systems of like social systems and things like that. And, assumptions that we made about the poor that were wrong. And
like what?
So I can remember this specific story. We had someone who came to our church, and he had some intellectual impairments, but he was pretty high functioning. But I mean, he was a real fervent attender of our church, and really just a part of who we were. And he needed some help with groceries one time, so we went shop groceries with him, got him some groceries, whatever. Like, not kind of a short time after that, he said he needed help again, and we are kind of like, well, okay, what's the deal here? It wasn't a one-time thing or an emergency thing. Like, what's going on? And we found out that his mother, like, was taking all of his food assistance, which they're not called food stamps, but that's what it was. Like, was basically using that all up and not giving any to him. And so on the outside, where it looks like he was not managing things properly, there was a deeper story going on. And also with no easy answer. We didn't have a relationship with his mother. We couldn't really intervene well. And so it's just one of those situations where you think there's a simplistic answer and you find out, no, there's not. It's very difficult.
Right. Yeah, at first blush, you might think, oh, he's wasting this, or he's eating too much, or,
Yeah, he's not being a good steward. Yep.
And then you go, oh, this is actually way more complicated, and I don't know what I would do in that situation.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And with him specifically, it was one of those things like, well, my mom asked for it, and I love my mom,
Yeah.
And yeah, it was so much more complex than we thought.
Wow. Yeah, that is, and that's often the case for people, right? It's interesting. I think one of the problems that I don't want to paint with too broad a brush, but from my background, similar to yours, middle class white church, right? I think a lot of times it's just easy for us to not understand the problems, to not understand and take people seriously as people, trying to do the best they can. And to assume that if they would just do what we do, they'd be fine.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And also, I think we see our own problems as being complex and having a lot of
right,
a lot of layers to them, but other people's problems are simplistic.
So easy. I could solve those problems.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's a great point. Yeah, I hadn't thought of it quite that way, but yeah, that's totally right. Totally right. Wow. Okay. So you ended up, I don't know, when was this? When were you a pastor?
Oh boy, it went by with a blur. So I think we started in 2006.
Okay.
And so was there for, about 5 years. So we moved here in 2011. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Here in Austin. Yeah.
Yeah. And you felt called to that, you said. Was there something you wanted to plant churches, but what was it about planting churches or about being in ministry that was really calling to you? Was there?
Well, specifically church planting, you'll never believe this, but a bunch of naivete. I thought, I grew up in a somewhat traditional church, and I saw the church I was in growing up fighting a bunch of battles with tradition, like, not big C church tradition, but like that specific body, things, the way they had always done things. And I thought, boy, church planting is probably a great way to get past that, because you've never done it before. So you can never say we've never done it this way before,
right.
And that sounded really great to me. And so while that is true, there are just there's a whole bunch of other baggage that comes with planting a church as well. I mean, you're kind of remaking the wheel there in some regards. So yeah, I mean, ministry period, I felt from a very young age like I was called to ministry. In fact, pretty soon after I had that experience with Christ at 12, I felt like ministry was where God had a calling for me. And so I honestly, at first, I think I thought that was going to be youth ministry, probably just because that's where the life change happened for me.
Mm-hmm.
That made the most sense. And I could identify with my youth minister a lot more than I could with my pastor at the time. And so But when I went to college, I would do like summer internships with youth ministries, and I was a part-time youth minister for a while, and fun and good things happen there too. But I thought, there's no way I can do this professionally
Yeah,
after this.
I don't blame you.
It's for some people for sure, and
Yep.
those people that are gifted at it should do it, and people like me who aren't should not.
God bless them. Yeah, when I was in seminary, one time my grandma said to me, Eric, you should go be a youth pastor. I said, Grandma, I don't really like other people's kids that well. You know?
Yeah, and it's so hard because church world likes to shoehorn people in and make youth ministry like a stepping stone into other ministry, whether you're gifted at youth ministry or not.
Right. Yeah, obviously, coming from a smaller church where we did, it was like if you were, you didn't have to be gifted, you just had to be willing.
Just to be there. Yeah.
If you're willing, you're called.
A warm body.
That's right. Yeah. Anyway, well, that's good. Yeah. Okay. So that's interesting. You have this kind of sense that God's calling you to something and to really changing people's lives. It sounds like you're a guy who really needs meaning, and you really want to add a lot of value, maybe, can I say spiritual value to people's lives?
Yeah. I mean, I hope so. Yeah, I think I am just, one, I'm the surface level of like, hopefully every Christian fits into this. I find Jesus particularly compelling. And so there's that level. And then after that, I just gravitate towards those conversations. And that's kind of how I want to spend my time. I think that's the simplest way that I can describe kind of what I feel as what we might call a calling.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Have you ever had a time when God seemed far away, or when you were either angry with him or he just wasn't as present to you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you tell us about that, and then maybe what God did to bring you out of it?
Yeah, I think I've had different points in my life where I think like the church fathers or the theologians of old would call it the dark night of the soul.
Yeah.
Just where you don't feel God, and you don't feel like him, like you don't hear his voice. And yeah, I think those are times when they can feel they're scary and they're disruptive. And specifically, I can think of two points in my life in which I felt doubt. And I think you can have doubt without the dark night of the soul, and you can probably have dark night of the soul without doubt. But these two times in my life, those two things kind of came together. And I like, those were distressing times. Just really, I mean, when you're growing up in church and all your world revolves around it, and then you get to a point and you think, maybe we just all made this up. And that's really scary. At the time it is. And I think looking back, like, I'm so glad I went through those things because they changed me and they really matured my faith. And I mean, I'm kind of at the point where I don't know if I can trust people who haven't had a significant time of doubt in their life.
Yep.
If it's that easy for you, I kind of doubt your, I don't know, intellect or sincerity, that probably seems harsh, but
well, that's one reason I asked the question, because and I don't know if I would put it exactly that way, but I do think it's a normal part of the Christian experience.
Yeah.
And it's important for us to speak about it and to talk about it. And so that's why it's one of the things I always like to ask and find out, what was that like? How did you feel? Did God eventually, because sometimes people have some really dramatic experiences with God that brings them out of that. Or they have some resolution where, one guy shared with me, his name's Quentin Banks. I just replayed his episode a couple weeks ago, He he said, he had tried to commit suicide, didn't work, and he had a good friend who kind of took him under his wing, and he finally came to the conclusion he didn't have to have all the answers. He just had this
Yeah.
huge thing
Yeah.
like, I don't have to know, I just got to trust God. That's all I got to do. And sometimes
Yeah.
we come to those kinds of things, and so I'd like to ask, like, was there a way that you saw his tenderness, or that he spoke to you specifically? It doesn't have to be, but sometimes there is. And if that's something you want to share, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so the first time was funny enough. Also, when I was 12 years old, looking back, putting it together, a lot happened that year, apparently. Because I
That's
think what
interesting.
happened was I went through that season of doubt, and when I came out of it, I was like, oh, um, I think I didn't even know God before.
Hmm.
And so that was kind of significant. And the other one happened when I was 18 and I had just gone to college. And, the weird thing was that for both of those times, there wasn't anything external that caused me to doubt. And I mean, when I was 12, there was definitely nothing external. I was still, going to the church I'd grown up in. And when I was 18, I had just gone to a Christian university where I was surrounded by believers. So I had every reason for my faith to be bolstered, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so, looking back on that, I've since kind of wondered if that was maybe more about like, not that there weren't spiritual things, there very much were involved, but perhaps a little bit of like brain development going on. Those changes when you're just becoming a teenager at 12, and then when you're becoming an adult at 18.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so, it's interesting when I was going through that at 18. I also went to this. I was like a sponsor for a youth event, and the speaker was a guy who spoke all about apologetics.
Hmm.
And the funny thing is, looking back now, like I don't know if those apologetics would have been that convincing to me now as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
Like even if as a believer, I may think like those are horrible reasonings, but for me at 18, they weren't. And so all I can say is like God used that kind of imperfect vessel to really like meet me where I was and to help me. And so I think part of the beautiful thing about that is now I'm so much more comfortable with doubt. And so I wouldn't say I go through seasons of doubt, but in a given day, I might go in and out of doubt. And,
Sure.
but I'm much more relaxed with it. And I can say, I've been through this before and I came out on the other end okay. So I'm just going to trust God through it. And I think that's so much more, I think that's better. Is it better to trust God when you've never doubted, or is it better to trust God through your doubt? To me, it's more significant when you can say, yeah, I do doubt, but I'm going to be faithful anyway.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where I've landed. And other people have helped me through that. Mentors from afar. Greg Boyd, through his
Mm-hmm.
books, he wrote a book called Benefit of the Doubt that was just like completely changed the way I thought of doubt. And I owe so much to him in that book for that, because it really flipped it on its head and reminded me that in fact doubt is necessary for faith. And so that now it's not that I don't doubt, but when I do, it's a very, very different experience, and it's not as anxiety inducing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's such a great point that we can trust God through it. I love that. That's part of the journey.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. You eventually left being a pastor,
Yeah.
and was that because of some of the things? Well, why was that? I'm not going to speculate.
So, ultimately it was because I felt a release from it. I think I kind of realized at some point that the church had gone as far as it could go under my leadership.
Hmm.
I think there was some complacency in the church too, just because I think because I had been because I was the one who had helped start it, it was kind of like, and through no one's fault but my own, just kind of this attitude of like, oh, Shane's got this. And so where
Mm-hmm.
people might have otherwise taken ownership, they kind of relied on me to steer the ship more than a pastor should. And so a lot of things going on there. And I was tired. I wasn't beaten up. A lot of pastors come out of those experiences really beaten up and torn down. And I wasn't any of that. But I was tired, and I think I was ready for something else. And I think I had realized that pastoring required some things that I probably just wasn't really good at. And so it kind of helped me kind of rethink where exactly my calling was too at the
Yeah.
same time.
Well, I'm interested in that because were there specific activities that weren't necessarily your calling, but were there parts of it that were, or that you liked, or is it pastoring as we sort of conceive of it in America, or is it?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I think that was probably part of it too, where we have some unhealthy expectations of a pastor, and I had them of myself too. I think the other part was I don't think I would have admitted this, but I think I really was drawn to pastoring because I loved preaching.
Mm,
And I think that was an earnest and honest gifting and desire. But you find out really quickly that pastoring is so much more than preaching.
yeah,
And so, I think I just thought the other stuff would come. And it was harder. And I realized that it's a gifting to do those kind of things. And um, the to be a pastor that is a specific gift. It's not a job title, if that makes
right,
sense. So, then just where that word comes from, like pastoring is in, shepherding, that's a really specific thing that's completely separate from preaching.
right. Yeah, from teaching. So that was one
Yeah.
of the reasons I was looking for Alan Hirsch's stuff, because the way he talks about that from
Yeah.
Ephesians 5. I mean, I've read that my whole life, right? I've done
Yeah.
Bible studies and whatever, but I have not heard it broken down in the way that he does. And I got to get that book. That's going to be on my list of things to read this fall. But very fascinating, different take, and it sort of, for me, maybe it's a similar experience to you. I wanted to be a pastor, but my emphasis was a little different. I was never really a preacher. I wanted to be a shepherd. That's the thing I like, to shepherd people, to talk to them, to listen to their story, to share, wisdom from the word or whatever, just spiritual direction. But that's not really super highly valued. If you
Yeah.
if you can speak, have those extroverted gifts, then great.
Yeah.
You'll be in high demand. And if you can't, yeah, why would anybody think about you? And
That's
that's
right.
kind of what I found as well. But yeah, interesting. I'm glad you said that about preaching. And I totally affirm people who have that gift. You got to do it because God's given it to you for a reason. And at the same time, I at least like to raise the question in conversation or in my church that, hey, this can't be the only gift we value. We have to value others.
Yeah. And it's unreasonable to think that all of those giftings, those shepherding, evangelizing, prophesying, all of those, it's unreasonable to think that all of those can be found in one person,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Right. Oh, that's so interesting. That's just, I've got a million thoughts on that. But all right. Good. Well, think about some of these guys who are like the big national kind of pastors, and they sort of model that in
Yeah.
some ways, or they appear to, and whether or not, within their actual organization, that's what they do or not. They probably don't. That's the
Yeah.
reality.
Yeah. That's right. That's right.
Interesting. Okay. So, you left, went into the secular world. Tell me about, did God, you felt like God released you into that. What was your, kind of spiritual posture during that time? I don't know how long ago that was either. So this may be a few years ago, you said?
So let's see. Pretty soon after that, about 6 months after I resigned, we moved here to Austin, and that was the very beginning of 2011. So, about 6, 7 years now.
Okay. And what's God been doing with you since then?
Well, when you asked about my posture when we left there, I thought, I thought, I thought I'm done with vocational ministry, and I was still open. I said I would never say never. I'll let God do what He wants to do in the future. But now I think I think that I need to just go get a secular job, and I'll be involved in my church and do all those things. But as far as me doing vocational ministry, I think I'm done. And so I I did that. Started a career in real estate and got probably about 9 months in, and it wasn't going well, and so I think that helped. That real estate wasn't a huge success, and nor should it have been. I didn't have contacts here or anything like that. It was again another very naive move, thinking I was going to jump in this career and it would take off. But after about 9 months, I thought this can't be it. Even if it was going well, I don't think this can be it. I think I need something, and I was missing spiritual conversations and working out theology and that kind of stuff. And so prayed, talked with people about it, and that's what ultimately it led to starting a blog, and then ultimately the podcast after that. So and it was I didn't feel like I had any promises from God like that was going to lead to a job or career or anything like that, but it was just kind of an outlet to have those discussions.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I think you do great work on Seminary Dropout. I've really enjoyed the episodes that I've had a chance to listen to. And again, I highly recommend, friends, that you go and check it out and download it. I think you're everywhere that I get podcasts anyway, in iTunes and Stitcher Radio. I assume you're in Google Play as well. People can find you there.
Yeah, should be everywhere.
Very good, very good. Where else? Anything else you want to leave us with about what you've learned in your journey?
Oh man, I so appreciate this conversation, Eric, and man, I love these kind of conversations. I've learned so much from the people that I've been able to talk to. I obviously, I think we've covered it. I don't have a seminary degree, but I've been able to sit down with just these brilliant minds. It almost feels like I've pieced together my own MDiv here. And those conversations are just so valuable. And I think it's so wonderful to live in a time where those resources are out there for free that anybody can listen to. All of these people who, people pay thousands of dollars to go to seminary, but you can hear these people for free online.
Oh yeah.
It's an amazing time to live in. So yeah, I would say, if everybody who's listening, you're fairly acquainted with the Christian world, and so there's probably some author that you enjoy. I probably interviewed him. I think we're at like 170 episodes of Seminary Dropout, and so out of some of those are somebody that you know and like. So that's when people ask kind of a starting point for Seminary Dropout. I just say look through the guest list and see who you like and start there, and then just subscribe and listen to then on out. And then just one last plug for OnRamp. Especially for those who maybe somebody who really needs to hear that. Please share that podcast as well.
Yeah, and if that's not a conversation you're privy to, you should at least check out an episode or two and start listening and seeing where God might take it.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, well, you are at Beard on a Bike, and you have a very nice beard, by the way. That's on Twitter. And then just if you look up Shane Blackshear or Seminary Dropout on Facebook, I'll link to all that in the show notes. People can find you.
Thanks so much, Eric. Hey, man, I really appreciate what you're doing and really enjoyed this conversation.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it.